was happy to yield to the senator from Virginia because I know that this issue of a government shutdown is particularly acute in the state of Virginia and Maryland, but we feel it all across the United States of America. Just a few minutes ago, I was on the telephone with Dr. Scott Gottlieb of the Food and Drug Administration and asked him what has been the impact of the Trump shutdown on the Food and Drug Administration. And Dr. Gottlieb was very explicit. He said the area which was hardest hit was food safety. Food safety is a responsibility assumed by the federal government over 100 years ago. After the publication of the novel The Jungle by Upton Sinclair, we decided that we would create a federal agency with the responsibility of inspecting food so that people across America would not suffer foodborne illness or worse. Well, we have a great agency and it does a great job when it's fully funded operationally. But the fact of the matter is over 40 million Americans will end up with a food illness in any given year and over 3,000 will die. So the responsibility of this agency is not some bureaucratic function. It is literally a life and death responsibility. And I asked Dr. Gottlieb, so what does the government shutdown do to the Food and Drug Administration when it comes to food safety? Well, he said we've had to suspend inspections at the highest risk food operations. I asked him for an illustration. Well, he said, for example, those facilities which make baby food, high-risk food inspection responsibilities of the FDA. And he said, we've decided we have to call back 150 employees to make sure that we resume inspection at these high-risk facilities like those that make baby food. Well, thank goodness they're going to resume them. But he told me he has a problem. Here's the problem. The people he's going to call back are in the lower income categories of federal employees. Many of them are making a decent wage, but only a decent wage, and certainly are not wealthy by any stretch, nor do they have savings to turn to. He said, I've got to call back these folks who are literally out of work because of the government shutdown, some of whom have applied for unemployment compensation, and tell them they've got to come to work. And when I declare them essential, Commissioner Gottlieb said, that's the law. They've got to return to work and come here for no pay. So here we have an important responsibility of the government, food safety, which is now being ignored, or I should say diminished, because of the shutdown. And as they try to resume some part of it, Commissioner Gottlieb has the awful responsibility of trying to pick those employees who will be hurt the least if they're called back to work. This is America. This is the United States of America. This is a great country, perhaps one of the greatest in the history of the world, and this is where we stand, that when it comes to making certain that baby food is safe for American families across the United States, we have to pick and choose those who will be asked to come to work for nothing to perform that function. That's not the only area that he mentioned. He went on to talk about areas that are not covered by user fees. You see, some of the pharmaceutical companies and medical device companies actually pay for inspections. So as long as user fees are coming in, the inspections continue. But it doesn't apply to every aspect when it comes to medicine, for example. When it comes to compounding medicines, which is done at a state level primarily, the federal government has a responsibility in some areas to make sure that those medicines are safe. Do you recall a few years ago in the state of Massachusetts when the compounding standards were lax and innocent people died because the injections they were given were not sterile? Those are exactly the responsibility of the Food and Drug Administration. And they are responsibilities that are not being met as they are supposed to be met today because of this government shutdown. So if you think this is just about a lot of bureaucrats who are not showing up to work and are sitting by some swimming pool, you're dead wrong. These are people who are doing important things for America and keeping us safe in the process. There's also one other thing I want to mention to you. If you are in the midst of a clinical trial to prove up a new drug, an important drug for someone whose life depends on it, the clinical trials continue through the government shutdown. But if you've completed your trials and you want to make an application to sell this drug in America, you're stopped cold by this government shutdown. Stopped cold. Commissioner Gottlieb says we can't process these. Those potential life-saving drugs have to sit on the shelf because of the government shutdown, which this president has proudly declared he believes is in the best interest of America. Now tell that to the families that are waiting for that drug. Tell that to the people who labored for years to get it ready for market, that they just have to wait until the president's ready to move. I was there yesterday. I was at the meeting of the leaders with the president, vice president, members of his cabinet. It was not a long meeting. I think it lasted 17 minutes. The president came in and distributed candy bars to the people who were in attendance, and then started his speech. And it basically came down to this: unless you're prepared to give me this wall, I will keep the government shut down. That's what he said. And when we made it clear that government shutdown should not be a bargaining chip in this process, the president stood up after 17 minutes, said this is a total waste, turned, and in a fit of pique left the room. That to me was a sad moment in the history of this country, when the chief executive of the United States government, a man who was elected to manage and lead our government, has voluntarily shut down important and critical functions of that government for a political purpose. He is not serving the American people as he was elected to serve. And the victims, of course, won't be the president and his family, nor will it be many of the people who were in that room. It will be the 800,000 federal employees, victims of this shutdown. It will be half of them who are showing up for work today with no pay and won't receive a paycheck over the weekend. Many of us will travel home over the weekend, go through an airport. We'll go through the TSA inspection, as all passengers do, to make sure that we travel safely on airplanes. It's tough to look those TSA agents in the eye because we know what's happening. Many of them, barely making enough money to get by paycheck to paycheck, won't receive a paycheck this weekend. I called a group of them together at the O'Hare Airport on Tuesday. We held a press conference, and I asked four of them, explain what this means to you. And they talked about being unable to come up with the money to pay for gasoline to drive back and forth to work 39 miles each way. They talked about the difficulties that families are going to face when it comes to daycare for their children. What are they going to do with their kids if they're coming to work for no pay and they can't pay the daycare service? And those who have mortgage and rental payments, you know, some real consequences can follow. If you fail to make that mortgage payment on a timely basis, you may face an increase in interest rate on your mortgage. You may even face a downgrade of your credit rating. That's the real world for people who don't live in the White House. That's the real world for the victims of this prideful shutdown, which President Trump believes is in the best interest of this country. He's wrong. It's in the best interest of this country to open this government. It's in the best interest of Democrats and Republicans to sit down together and work out our differences when it comes to border security. We're all dedicated to border security. We just see it differently. We've got to find middle ground to come to a conclusion on this important issue. The last point I want to make is this. I am concerned that the majority leader, the Republican leader, Senator McConnell, has made it clear that he is waiting for a permission slip from President Trump to be the leader of the United States Senate. We are a separate and proud branch of government. We are given authority under this Constitution, which the President does not have. We do not wait for a permission slip from him to exercise that constitutional authority. The votes to pass these appropriation bills, I believe, are on the floor of the Senate today, and that is what has led Senator McConnell to the conclusion that he wouldn't dare call the bill. I think there are enough Republican senators who've spoken to me privately who are ready to step forward and say, end this mindless shutdown. They are ready to vote for the spending bills. Will it reach 67 to override a presidential veto? It just might do that. But let's test it by being the Senate under the Constitution, not by waiting for a permission slip from President Trump to exercise the constitutional responsibilities which each of us swore to uphold when we became members of this important body. I yield the floor.